Thanks, Coach John Tubiolo here, and I'd like to welcome you to this little video seminar about the failure and success cycle. Now, this is about a 2-hour seminar, but I'm going to try to cut it down into about 8 minutes and give you a really brief overview so you can understand why we have failures in our lives and why we have successes in our lives, and then what we can do about those failures and turn them into successes. So real quick, let's bring up the failure and success cycle. Now, the failure and success cycle begins with beliefs, and our beliefs lead us to either action or inaction in our lives. The reason that's so critical is if we believe we can do something, we usually take action on it. If we believe we can't do something, we don't take any action on it, and that leads us to the next step. That leads us to action or inaction. And action or inaction both equal a result. That result will either be failure or success at something that we're trying to accomplish. Now the question is, can action lead to failure? Absolutely. In the same way inaction can lead us to failure, so can taking action on something. But the critical thing is how we view that failure. And the results ultimately lead us to the next step, which is language of thought. And language of thought can either be positive or it can be negative. And that positive or negative language of thought that we have will ultimately lead us back to our beliefs. They'll either support or reject the beliefs that we have. Let's look at how putting all this together gives us either failure or success in our lives and allows us to either continue or not continue. Remember, it all comes down to beliefs, and that's what we're going to explain in this next section. So stick with us, don't go anywhere. So now let's look at putting this all together and understanding the failure and success cycle. Let's say, for example, we have a certain belief, and we begin with we can do certain tasks or a certain goal. We have a certain goal that we want to work toward, and we believe strongly that we can go after it. So that leads us to what? Taking action. It leads us to taking a certain action toward obtaining that goal or achieving something that we want. And what happens if we experience failure? We have this negativity that happens with the failure that we've had. So our language of thought starts to change. It begins to change how we view the belief on going toward that goal. Once we start to change that language of thought to not support a positive belief that things are possible, it leads us to the next step back in the cycle, which is inactivity. We're inactive, we quit trying, and what happens? We experience more failure because we quit trying. That's how we sabotage ourselves through this cycle, because we start to develop a language of thought associated with the belief that instead of things being possible, things are not possible. So we shouldn't even try because that becomes an impossibility. Successful people understand that the language of thought is critical to the belief, but also it's changing the action. So let's assume that we have a certain belief system. Okay, going back to the beginning, have a belief system. We want to try to achieve a certain goal. We go after that goal. We take action toward that goal. Let's assume the results are positive. We're successful at attaining that goal. What happens to our language of thought? It changes. It becomes more powerful. It becomes more inviting, more supportive to the belief that we have, and it becomes more inviting for us to take more action towards something else. And we start to experience success. We believe we can go towards something. We believe we can obtain something. If we take action on it and we experience failure, we change the language of thought that says, this is bad, we shouldn't go for it, to, well, instead of trying it that way, let's try it a different way. Let's try a different way to get there. Go back to the belief and say, it is possible. Maintain that same belief that all things are possible. Just take a different action. Different actions usually equal what? Different results. The problem is if we don't take action, we'll still gain a result. The problem is it'll always be failure. And once we experience failure through inaction, we're going to continue that cycle because you know what? We don't want to be hurt again. We don't want to take action on something and fail. We'd rather not take any action on it and fail because that's easier. It's easier for us to digest. It's easier to say, well, I didn't do it because I knew this was going to be the result anyway. But when we take action, sure, we're putting ourselves out there and we're saying we have that possibility of failing. We might be hurt. We might experience rejection. But through the language of thought, we can get through that, work through the belief, and take a different action. And what happens when we take a different action? We get a different result. So that's how this system works. That's why this system is so critical. This entire cycle really does move us through our lives. The question is, what are you going to do? And what language of thought will you use the next time you experience failure in your life? Thanks for tuning in, guys. Keep in touch and sign on so that you can be a subscriber. And anytime we release a new video, they'll let you know. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm your success coach, John Tubiolo.